In this video, we're going to talk about recursion. And recursion is a topic in programming that can stretch your brain a little bit and is kind of hard to wrap your head around it at first, but we hope this example makes it a little more interesting. So in lecture and online, if you look, you'll find examples of recursion about things like making a palindrome or doing Fibonacci numbers. So in this video, we're going to use something a little more real world. We're going to talk about infections. So think about how an infection spreads through a population. The first person gets infected, and then that person has a group of friends or a group of people close to them, and that person infects all of those people, all of their friends. Each of those people then have their own group of friends that they spend time with, and those new infected people all infect their own groups of friends, and diseases just spread quickly like that. That's a really good example of recursion. So the definition of recursion is a function that calls itself. So today we're going to write an infect function that infects one person and then goes and calls that same function and infects all of that person's friends. And then that function call will then go again and infect those person's friends. So to start out, let's make a person class to represent a person in our world of spreading of infectious diseases. So we'll just say class person, and what are the properties this person's going to have? First off, we need to give the person a name so we can know who they are. So that'll just be a string. And then if we want to talk about whether the person's infected or not, we need to store that somehow. So we'll store an isInfected field, and that'll be a Boolean value. True they are infected or false they are not. And then every person is going to have an array of people that's their friends. So we'll just call this field friends, and it'll be of the type person array. So everyone has an array of people that they consider their friends. So as you can see, we've set up some people in this world of spreading diseases. So we've got some members of the 110 team and even Chris here in our population. And then we've given all these people friends arrays. So all these people have a name, their isInfected variable was set to false by default, and then we've given them all some friends. And then we have this people array that is everyone in our population. So diseases start by infecting one person. So the first thing we're going to do is we'll say infect Kate. So before we do that, we have to write this infect function. So let's declare our infect function, that it'll be a function and its name will just be infect, and it'll take one parameter, that's a person to infect. And we'll just call that person. And this function will just do some stuff, it won't return anything, so its return type will be void. Alright, when you're writing recursive functions, the first thing usually that you do in the function is set up your base case. This is the case under which you want your function to stop recurring. If we didn't have this, the function would just keep on going, infinitely many times, and we would get a Stack Overflow error. So first we want to set up at what point do we want to stop. And it makes sense, I think, for our infection function to stop if the person we're trying to infect has already been infected. So we'll say if person.isInfected, so if that variable has already been set, if the person's already been hit by our disease, then just return. And even though the return type's void here, we can just say return, and that means end the function there. And remember, just saying person.isInfected is the same thing as saying person.isInfected triple equals true, because those are both Boolean expressions that will evaluate to the value of person.isInfected. Alright, now that we've got our base case, the other case is that the person has not been infected. So underneath that, we're going to make the person infected, so we'll say person.isInfected equals true. And let's print out some message to ourselves so we can keep track of what's going on, who's getting sick in our population. So underneath that, we'll say print, and inside the print statement, we'll say person.name, so we'll print the person's name concatenated with was infected. And that way we can keep track of when people get infected. Okay, cool. Great, so now we've infected that one person, but our function still isn't recursive. So in order for this function to be our recursive infecting function that we want, we need to then go and infect all of that person's friends. So we can do that with a for loop. So we can loop through the person's friends and on each iteration infect that person. So standard for loop will say for let I be a number that's initialized to 0, while I is less than the length of the person's friends, increment I by 1 every time, and on each loop we want to infect the person at index I of the person's friends array. Great, so now this function should work. So all we have to do is set it off by saying infect Kate. Kate will be our patient 0, and if we save this and run it, we should say that everyone in our population gets infected. Alright, so let's trace through exactly how this happened. First, we said infect Kate. So the first person to get infected is Kate, and sure enough we see on the side the first message we get printed out is that Kate was infected. Then our recursive call goes and tries to infect Kate's friends, and the first one of Kate's friend is me, Hank. So I'm the next person to get infected. Then, in the process of infecting me, our function will go and try and infect my friends. And the first one of my friends, in this case, is Kate. But then that function call just returns, because Kate has already been infected. So the for loop, my for loop continues, goes to infect my next friend, which is Julia. Julia gets infected, and then that function call recursively goes and tries to infect Julia's friends. The first one of Julia's friends is Chris. Chris gets infected. That's the end of Julia's friends. So we go back out. Now we're looping through my friends to infect them. The next one of my friends to infect is Mason. Mason hasn't been infected yet, so we infect Mason. We go to try and infect Mason's friends. Julia is the only one of Mason's friends, and she has already been infected, so we don't do anything. We're done looping through infecting my friends, so we go back out and try to infect the next of Kate's friends, which is Kit. Kit hasn't been infected yet, which means that Kit gets infected, and we go and try and infect Kit's friends. The first of Kit's friends to infect is Mason, who's already been infected, so that doesn't do anything. And then Chris, Kit's last friend, has also already been infected. So then our function returns, and we're done infecting our whole population. So the line that made this function recursive is where inside the infect function we said infect this other person. So we're starting from one function and then pausing that function execution and going and starting to execute the function again. And in that process we might stop and go and execute the same function again, and then we'll pop back out as we return from those. So this is a really good example of recursion, and there's no way that you could accomplish this same effect of spreading from people like a disease does without recursion. You couldn't do nested for loops to loop through everyone's friends, because we don't know how many friends people have, and we can't plan for all of that. So the only way to accomplish things like this, things that are like tree branching structures like this, usually you need recursion. So if you think about like a piece of gossip about you that's spreading, you could also think about tracing who of your friends you think would go and tell people, and how that message would kind of recursively spread throughout a school. So if this didn't make sense, then loop the video back and maybe it'll make sense with another step of recursion. See you next time.